How wonderful to be together today in one mountain, many paths, where our mission is what Dr. Marc Gafni and Barbara Marx Hubbard call a planetary awakening in love through unique self symphonies. We are activating a new humanity, and we are awakening as a new species, Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens. As a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, a zendo, no one is excluded, everyone is included, and we come together to attune to the evolutionary impulse awakening within us. Welcome home, everyone. I am Kristina Tehel, the co-executive producer, along with Krista Josepha, Jamie Long, and Jacqueline Clark, and we are so delighted to be together with each and every one of you for week 284 of our live community broadcast. And if you are new today, we especially welcome you. What a privilege it is to be part of a global community where we contribute to humanity's flourishing. Use the Zoom and the Facebook chat functions to say hello, to let us know where you're from, to resonate the Dharma, and to speak your prayers. On Zoom, do check that your chat settings say everyone so that we can all hear from you. Sign up for and read our weekly emails. There you will find our replays, our community activities, our feature videos, our volunteer opportunities, celebrations, surprise, and inspiration. Care to step into the work and the practice of creating the great Homo Amor library? Reach out to me for the holy opportunity. My email is in the chat box. There's truly nothing like being deep in the working Dharma each and every day. Today, I give a deep, deep, deep bow to Jacqueline Clark, who models the care and the devotion for all of us who are supporting Dr. Marc Gafni, the Center for Integral Wisdom, and the Great Library. Jacqueline, we can absolutely not do this without you. And we see your tremendous creative input to the evolution of love. Thank you. What to expect today? First, a Dharma recap for myself. Then Dr. Gafni will set our intention. David will resonate the evolutionary love code that we're working with. Then we move into our evolutionary sermon with Dr. Gafni and sometimes with the clip from Barbara Marx Hubbard. And then we move into meditation to enter prayer. To close, Krista invites us to commit our outrageous acts of love. And then at the end, we bring everyone on for our goodbyes and an intimate dance party. Marc writes evolutionary love codes. Marc and Barbara studied the codes together, often comparing them to Barbara's own 52 codes for conscious self-evolution. These codes crystallize the new story of humanity, quote, evolving the course of consciousness and culture, which is the source code of love, unquote. We have the privilege to be a part of the emergence of these first principles and first values. The Dharma gates are open. Every week we are blessed. We do our best to end at an hour, and we will definitely go over today as we have a very big Dharmic sense making to do. Okay, I welcome all who are new. We need you. Know that every week is a standalone and every week builds on the week before. One mountain, many paths is radically committed to telling the new universe story. So here goes my Dharma recap from last week. The Ukraine, the moral bankruptcy of the moral equivalency arguments about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. To try and reduce the conflict in Ukraine to a power play between superpowers is precisely to miss the point of what's happening. There is no moral equivalence between the Western worldview and the Russian worldview today. At stake here is the very future of humanity. But not only because there is a horrific war in Ukraine, which requires all of our attention and all of our support and all of our outrageous love. There are hierarchies of value. Putin's oligarchical rape of Russia and Ukraine is a shadow of nationalism, completely abuses the people, and is not morally equivalent to the Western vision of universal human rights. There is no legitimate comparison between the Western vision of universal human rights and the utter suppression of protest, brutality, and murder that is actually par for the course in a closed society. Putin's Russia, run as a top-down oligarchy where people are disempowered, information is suppressed, and there's a fundamental arbitrariness to human life, which is the masses of the people are actually ignored in multiple ways. Groups are singled out and put in concentration camps. To make a moral equivalence between the United States and Russia is wrong. To portray the United States or NATO as always knights in shining armor that are not without significant corruption, significant degradation of value, and not to challenge this degradation is a tragedy. The United States and the Western world is a dream in the making, a work in progress, a dream that is not yet fulfilled. And we've got to hold the dream to make the dream true. The value structure and the worldview to hold the dream is there. Humans are actually wired for pleasure, for goodness, for truth, for beauty. Outrageous pain is a violation of the value structures of the universe. Outrageous love at this moment means to do everything we can to help in every possible way, to articulate the new source code of consciousness and culture, and to tell the new story of value. We stand for a vision that moves beyond all of the racisms, all of the ethnocentrisms, a vision that stands for the correct gathering of information, for the right to do real sense-making, a vision that stands for the personal and for the irreducible dignity of the individual. We have to understand there's an evolution of value. Value is not eternal and absolute. Value evolves. For instance, democracy is an evolving value. 1,000 years ago, the value of democracy didn't exist in the world. Today, we have a value of democracy, and it is an evolving value. Although democracy is imperfect, of all the forms of government available today, it is one that is most supportive of value, which is most supportive of goodness, which is most supportive of Godness. The Archimedean lever with which we can change the world is only a new story of what story is, a new understanding of story, and a new story of value. And that's what's going to allow us to move through this Ukraine and all the future Ukraines and all of the suffering of the world. Now I invite us to more deeply enter the holy and the sacred space of one mountain, many paths. And I turn my word to you, Dr. Marc Gafni.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I want to just thank everyone for being here. And I know that the last 2 weeks have been, a very, very deep dive, and it was a gorgeous Dharma recapitulation. Kristina Amelon to Haley, and happy birthday to you, right? And we are madly celebrating your birth, right? We can't do it without you, and we don't want to do it without you. Happy birthday, love, right? From all of us. What a gorgeous Dharma recapitulation, and how wildly, wildly important. Now, I'm deeply aware that the last 2 weeks have been hard, right? And as you can tell, I'm not in my normal place. I'm at my dear friend and one of the founder leaders of the original Center for Integral Wisdom, right? Sally Kempton is one of the great teachers of Cosmoshaivism. So I'm here visiting Sally, who's a dear friend of mine, and Kristina's, and Kristina Kincaid, and many of ours. And I've been just very, very deep, with you, with so many of us, in, finding our way here. And finding our way here is a very, very big deal. So, someone said to me yesterday, you shouldn't do a big sense making today because we've done 2 of them already, and it'll be too exhausting for people, and, do something lighter, more popular. And I laughed, because that's, of course, not who we are. That's who are we at One Mountain. We are the very hub and heart of a fierce commitment to the evolution of the source code, to evolve the source code of consciousness and culture, which is the evolution of love. And so we're going to be filled with joy today, even as we're filled with pain. We're going to laugh, the laughter of possibility, out of one side of our mouth, even as we cry the tears of pain, the immediate pain of what's happening in the places of outrageous pain in the world. And we have a particular focus on the Ukraine at this moment for self-evident reasons. And we refuse to turn away. And part of our activism, and many people are engaged in on-the-ground activism of multiple forms. But essential in our activism is understanding at this moment between utopia and dystopia, at this moment of existential risk, of potential catastrophic risk, how do we actually find our way here? How does Ukraine call us forward, both to the actions that need to be done now, immediately, in this very second, in this very day, in these very days, and yet at the same time, and no less important, how do we do the sense making that allows us to actually create a world in which Ukraine is not a possibility? But more than that, create a world in which the impending dominoes of catastrophic and existential risk that could emerge from Ukraine are not a possibility. And we need to be fierce. In the same way that we need to be fierce in rejecting moral equivalencies, at the same way we need to be fierce in critiquing and understanding the deep flaws in the positions of Ukraine itself, of the United States, of NATO. We need to actually not make a moral equivalency, But we're not at, and this is what we said last week, we're not at level 1 pre-tragic where there's just good guys and bad guys. That's pre-tragic. Black and white. We actually have to move from pre-tragic to tragic. And tragic means we actually understand, and we're going to talk about it this week, the flaws and the potential mistakes, and sometimes tragic mistakes, of the United States, of NATO. And we also understand some of the dignity and what actually is moving Russia. And that's the tragic. The tragic is we've moved beyond the easy us, them, pre-tragic, and we're actually seeing the complexity. We've moved past first simplicity. We've gotten to complexity. But we can't stay there. To stay there would be to get mired in a moral equivalence. We have to go to post-tragic. And in post-tragic, we actually reassert a hierarchy of values. And that actually, there's not a moral equivalence between NATO and the West, and between Putin's Russia and Xi's China, which is an extension of Mao's China. And Putin is, in a deep sense, right, a reinvention, right, of an autocratic Stalinist tradition. And we actually have to know that the history of communism in Russia is one of the most degraded histories on the planet. And whatever the structural vision was, which we'll get to as well, like the way communism was implemented, for example, in Ukraine, the Holodomor famine, millions of Ukrainians killed by a state-enforced famine by the Communist Party. Right? Communism has been, right, other than Nazism, in the way it's been enacted in the world, right, from the beginning, both in China and in Russia, the worst blight on humanity. And the worst blight because it had actually exponential more power than the pre-modern religions. It was operating, right, in a modern world, and therefore could kill exponentially more people. And I've spent, many, many years reading carefully, the scholarship on communism, right? And it's horrific. And so we can't fall into moral equivalence, right, and actually equate the worldviews of the West, right, and the enacted worldviews of communism. That's level 3. It's post-tragic. It's post-tragic. Now, we have to actually begin to understand this much better today. And what we're going to do is, and I want to see if, and I'm going to just see if you can meet me in the chat box and see if this makes sense, okay? See if this makes sense. We're going to do sense-making as activism, right? Sense-making as the evolution of love, okay? That's what we're going to do today. We're going to do sense-making as the evolution of love. And we're going to do this not only for the few thousand people in our community around the world, right, who are gorgeous, and we are gorgeous together, and we are a unique self-symphony, and we take responsibility, right, to be part of the heartthrob of the revolution of love, which is the evolution of love, which is the enactment of a new world story. And it's only a new world story that can change the trajectory of catastrophic and existential risk. And it's only a new world story of value rooted in first principles and first values that can actually respond today to the Ukraine, but also to all the future enactments of the Ukraine. It's only a source code change that can actually take us home, evolve love. And so I want to ask you a very, very serious question now, right? And I just wanted to give you a sense here. I'm going to unplug my computer just for a second. All right, so I'll just give you a sense. Here's my table, okay? Right? Lots, right? There's like a zillion articles and a zillion pieces of paper. And I've been, and our team incredibly put together, probably 50, 60 articles. And I've tried to to kind of move through all of them late into the night and early into the morning, and to integrate them for you, and then to come out the other side with sense making. But we're doing sense making here as activism, sense making as mad love, sense making as enacting here the new world, sense making which will find its way ultimately to the halls of the Kremlin and to the heart of the White House and to the capitals, right, of Europe, right, and to Beijing in China, right, and to all of Latin America and all of Asia, right? This sense making is, and I want to ask you this question super seriously because we've got a super big day and a beautiful day and a painful day and an ecstatic day. So I want to ask you this question super seriously, okay? You're ready? And we'll meet each other in the chat box with your permission, right? Are we willing? Are you willing? Are we willing? Are you willing to play today a larger game? Who's willing to play a larger game? Are we willing to play a larger game? To like full on commit, right? We're going to actually, as activists, sense-making activists, right? Sensually, as the eros of the cosmos, right? Participate, right? Directly, clearly in the evolution of love, and to find our way through and to actually create a beacon of possibility, right? And to move beyond the thicket of contradictions and actually find our way, right? So last time, are you ready to play a larger game? Are you ready to participate in the evolution of love? Oh my God. All right, here we go. Okay. So let's start with the code. Let's start with the code. Lots of steps, right? I understand that not everyone will make it all the way through, but if you can, right, there's actually, it's hard to imagine that there's anything, right? And I get, individual, so mad love to everyone, but there's nothing more important than this. We got to do this, right? As the peace room. This is the peace room. We're at war in the peace room, and we're at war for peace. In order, peace means wholeness. Wholeness means, right? Shalom, peace means wholeness in the original Hebrew. It means we have to include as many perspectives as possible, but not in a way that reduces us to aperspectival madness, as my friend Ken Wilber likes to call it, meaning a kind of relativism, a kind of, right, both sides are equally flawed. We need a hierarchy of value, but we need to understand deeply what's moving Putin, right? We need to understand what's moving the West. We need to understand the visions of value. We need to understand where we can go and how we can get there. So we need to articulate this new story, this new vision of value together. We need to actually, literally today, right, to evolve the source code. So we're not doing entertainment. We're not doing wisdotainment. And I'm going to be a little bit hesitant, a little bit halting. I'm going to try and, I'm working this out together with you. This is not a speech. It's not a lecture. We're going to work this out together. Okay? Oh my God. Oh my God, I'm so madly delighted and privileged, right, to be with you. David, sweet man, give us the code.
Thank you, Dr. Marc. I'm so honored to be here with you, also to support you and to be in this process of discernment and sense making. So friends, I'm going to resonate the code, and the code here is something that can actually help us clarify our perception. Because as Marc says, often, we're yearning to love, and love is not just a feeling, but a perception. So as we resonate the code, let's go into our yearning to be more intimate with reality, our yearning to evolve love and make sense from a higher level. So here's this week's evolutionary love code. Reality can only be healed by the evolution of love, which is the evolution of intimacy. The evolution of love, which is the evolution of intimacy, requires powerful, sacred, value-driven intimacy at the egocentric level, the ethnocentric level, the world-centric level, and the kosmocentric level. This means that the evolution of love must reject, based on a shared story of value, the shadow versions of egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, and kosmocentric intimacy. That is what we mean by Homo Amor. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn my word back to you, beloved Dr. Marc.
Thank you, David. And I was hoping You're going to read that twice because I needed an extra minute, but you did gorgeous, right? No, that was fantastic. Thank you, David. I'm going to be just friends. I'm going to be looking at my phone. So just so you understand, I'm looking at my phone not because I'm writing my mom. Dear Mom, one mountain's a little boring today. So I'm just writing you a note. I'm looking at my phone because I have a list of clips here and I have a whole bunch of notes to myself. Okay, so we're going to begin with just a simple quote, and I'm going to give you two versions of it. Okay, and then we're going to go afterwards to a clip of Putin speaking to a rally, but we're going to see that clip after, so it's going to be two in a row we're going to see, and then we're going to dive in. So I'm going to share kind of a framing right now for a minute. Then we're going to look right afterwards, Kristina and David, catch this carefully. We're going to look at the clip that Zelensky showed Congress this week, that the president of the Ukraine, right, Zelensky, who's been a gorgeous hero in these last weeks, and we're sending him mad blessing. We're going to see the clip that he showed the United States Congress. It's the first clip we're going to see. And then immediately afterwards, I'm going to say a word about that clip. Then we're going to see a second clip of Putin talking to a rally. And the Putin clip is about 4 minutes. I'm going to ask everyone to really watch carefully. Because those are going to be core texts we're going to look at. And then we're going to look at a whole bunch of songs, and there's a lot that's going to happen today. And then we're going to end, in the end, we're not going to skip prayer. We're going to end with prayer, right? And with Krista, okay? So here we go. So let's just start with the Lord of the Rings, right? And this is from the film The Fellowship of the Ring. And I often experience us together as the Fellowship of the Ring, right? We have a mad commitment to the evolution of love and to evolve the source code. And we are the Fellowship of the Ring, where friendship is everything and commitment to each other is everything. And we'll talk about the Fellowship of the Ring. We're going to begin with the Fellowship of the Ring today, right? And then we're going to end with the Fellowship of the Ring. And I just want to frame where we are. I want to say something about what David said, which was wildly important. David cited a key piece of the Dharma, the new world vision, which we call cosmo-erotic humanism. And if you're new, right, if all the phrases don't make sense, don't worry, they'll begin to become clear. But we're articulating a new world story, which we call cosmoerotic humanism. And one of the principles of cosmoerotic humanism that David cited very beautifully, and he brought it to bear really beautifully now, David was beautiful, right, is that love is not merely an emotion, right? Love is a perception, right? I love you means I can see you. So to be a lover today, you have to be able to see. You have to be able to see to perceive. And what's happening to so many people now is, right, 99% of the world can't see. Either we're lost in an enormous amount of Western propaganda, which there absolutely is, or we're lost in, on the other side, in Russian propaganda, which there absolutely is. Now, there's no moral equivalence between them. I want to make that clear. We're at the post-tragic level of rejecting moral equivalence, but we're not at the pre-tragic level of us-them. Does everyone get that distinction? And notice that in the old world propaganda, and Tom, this is for you, in the old world propaganda meant we dropped leaflets on the enemy, right? Today, each side is propagandizing its own people, right? And by propagandizing, I mean telling a story that leaves out an enormous amount of information. Now, there's different kinds of propaganda. There's not moral equivalence between Russian propaganda and American propaganda. There's not a moral equivalence between those two kinds of propaganda, right? For sure not, right? But having said that, right, America's not telling the whole story, right? The instant demonization of Putin, which is justified. It's justified. Garry Kasparov, right, the former chess master, right, who appeared in a recent podcast, right, amplified from a Russian perspective the justification of the demonization of Putin. But we also need to understand something about where he lives, right, and what drives him, right, in order not to demonize them so that we can't actually bring this to a higher level. And if we split off, right, through our demonization, any sense of who Putin is or what's happening in Russia today, we won't actually be able to participate in the evolution of love. We won't be able to see. So when I propagandize in a way where I can no longer see a larger whole, then there's a failure of love, because love is a perception. Love means to see. At the same time, when I see through a lens of moral equivalence and I can't create a hierarchy of values, right, then I'm not loving. So to be love, to participate in the evolution of love, what we call, for those of you who are here for the first time, we call it to be an outrageous lover. It's outrageous. To love outrageously is to include everything, to not split anything off, and then at the same time to be able to discern, right? To achieve a level of moral clarity, which is not black and white, but which is real, which is powerful, which arouses will, even within the context of our uncertainties. Even as we hold the mystery, we can actually achieve genuine certainties, which are real, which allow us to act, which allow us to move forward. And so, David, thank you for that, right? In other words, love is a perception, so we're going to be engaged in the activist act of perception, but not only for ourselves. Does everyone get that? We're not doing this just for ourselves. This is not for the group of us that are here, although it's completely for us. It's totally personal, but we're doing it as evolutionary lovers, right? We're doing it, right, as a unique self-symphony, acting, right, for the sake of the whole. Acting for the sake of the whole, to literally be at that leading edge where we can actually evolve love. So that's part one of the framing. Part two. So the Fellowship of the Ring. So in the movie, Frodo says to Gandalf, and Gandalf is like the prophetic figure, and Frodo is one of the key young men, children, right? In the Fellowship of the Ring, he says, "I wish none of this had happened." And Gandalf says, "So do all who live to see such times." But that's not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that's given us. Does everyone get that? Right? This is where we are, but that's the version from the film. I actually want to go to the book, the original version that Tolkien wrote. And Tolkien, right, wrote in Oxford, where I wrote my doctorate at Oxford, and we used to sit at the same pub. So I feel close to him in that beautiful way. Okay? So in the actual original book that Tolkien wrote in the pub that I wrote my doctorate in Oxford, right, here's what Frodo says. Frodo doesn't say, "I wish that this had never happened." He said, "I wish it needed not to have happened in my time." Because things need to happen, but we're like, why does this have to happen in my time? And for virtually everyone here, nothing like this has happened in our time. And Gandalf says, "So do I. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." And we are, my friends, at a very specific time. This is the time when the fate of the world will be decided. But for the first time in human history, the fate of the world is not just the fate of the world today. It's whether there will be a future world. And the world is interlocking. Everything's connected to everything else. We live in a world with exponential technologies, which are available to state actors, which are desperate to non-state actors. A completely globally interconnected world. The unbearable intimacy of a globally interconnected world, which has multiple vectors of capacity to self-destruct. That's the time we live in. Right? And can you hear Frodo saying to Gandalf, "I wish I didn't have to live at this time," but we do live at this time. And time in the original Hebrew is Zman, Z-E-M-A-N, Zman. And Zman, friends, means invitation. Right? Time is an invitation, right? There's an invitation at play here. And the invitation is to plug in my computer so it doesn't go out. That's the first invitation. And the second invitation is that in this moment, we have to participate in the evolution of love. This is ours to do. We can't wait for someone else to do it. Right? To be a lover at this moment says, I'm willing to take responsibility for the whole. I'm willing to understand that at this time, this is not my parents' time. This is not 40 years ago. This is not where I thought it would be. How many of us ever thought we would be in a conversation like this, where what we do today and our sense making is part of the fabric of a process that can actually evolve love, and only the evolution of love, which is to being able to see and tell a new story that can become a shared story of value rooted in first principles and first values. That's the only move we have to actually speak for the future and as the future, and to do everything we can to ensure that there will be a future. So that's the time we live in. Does everyone get that? Everyone get that? That's the time we live in. It's a time that no generation in history has ever lived in. But as Gandalf says to Frodo, we don't get to choose the time we live in. The time chooses us. So I want to just ask everyone, just to, if you can, to meet me for a second in the chat box, okay? And just if you can write this sentence, if you can feel it. This time chose me. And feel it personally. This time chose me. Right? Who can feel that? This time chose me. Right? This time chose me. Right? And if you can take it up the next level, this time chose us. Because here we are together. Right? This time, my friends, this time chose us. Right? This is our time. This is our time. Okay. So take us inside. We're going to see 2 clips as the introduction. And then Krista, we'll get ready in the chat box, the text from Cook. Okay, we'll get that in the chat box, but we'll put it in the chat box right as we finish the 2 clips. So let's look at the first clip, right, which will be Zelensky's clip that he showed to Congress, because we just have to feel it directly. Then we're going to go to Putin's clip, and then we dive in. Okay, here we go. Clearly, without question, standing for Ukraine in this moment is an overriding and the overriding moral imperative. Right? That's absolutely clear. We need to stand for and with Ukraine in every possible way. That's the given of the moment. Now let's go on. right? And the pictures spoke for themselves, and there's 1,000 pictures, and there's 1,000 moments of suffering. And then there's children dying, there's women dying, there's men dying. And I don't want to say that there's, even civilians dying, although there are civilians dying every place, but we kind of make soldiers not into people. There's human beings dying, right? All over. And we just got to breathe that in, and we can't look away, right? And I know you can feel people we're kind of bored already, right? Right? It held our attention briefly. We've got to turn towards the suffering, and we need to act in every way possible. We need to be love in action. Yes. Now let's look at the second clip. Putin speaking to a rally. The context here is the celebration of the annexation of Crimea. Right? Crimea was annexed 8 years ago. Crimea is a peninsula in the Ukraine. And notice, to love, we got to even know where Crimea is. And a Crimean admiral defected, right, joined the Russian side, right? The Crimean people, right, did not challenge in any substantive way the Russian annexation. There was actually quite a few Crimeans who supported it, right? There was huge joy in Russia. There was a kind of national jubilation, right, celebrating the annexation of Crimea, which Russia felt was part of its essential, identity. And Putin hoped that Ukraine would go the way of Crimea. So just a couple of days ago was the 8th anniversary, right, of the annexation of Crimea, which Putin uses as an opportunity to speak his public piece, right, to state his vision. So let's see, and I want to see both what the commentator says and what Putin says, and this is going to be our takeoff point. Take us inside.
Crowds packed into Russia's Olympic Luzhniki Stadium, really celebrating the annexation of Crimea, the 8-year anniversary of that, all the while Russia is continuing to threaten the territorial integrity of not only now eastern Ukraine, but across much of the country now, including the capital, Kyiv. So we're really seeing these quite shocking pictures from Moscow now. Crowds packed in, waving the Russian flag, a celebration of this annexation. Videos shown really celebrating the Russian military. But of course, this is important timing for Russia. We have heard reports from NATO and other Western officials that morale within the Russian military and even support from within Russia is waning. We have also, of course, seen protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg against the war. So this is really a show by the Kremlin to really bolster that support for the country, for the military, and for what it has described as a military operation in Ukraine. But of course, this is a full-scale war targeting what we've seen, civilian infrastructure, and bringing the country really to a standstill now. But of course, these pictures will come as quite a shock to those in Ukraine, seeing the celebration of an annexation, which of course brought about what we're seeing now just 8 years ago. And of course, for those in the Donbass region, which has been hit particularly hard by Moscow's invasion, this will of course be difficult to watch. Now, we are hearing reports that members of staff from the Kremlin, other state officials were actually pressured to attend this rally. They were bussed in. Now, CNN hasn't been able to independently verify these reports. But of course, this does fit into the narrative of the idea of Russia pushing this PR campaign as a sort of last-ditch effort, as we see that lowering of morale within the troops, and of course, a show of really opposition to the war by protesters within Russia as well. Eleni?
Yeah, Nada, I mean, I have to say, it's pretty surreal seeing these images, the celebration of the annexation. And this has been part of, the sort of Russian propaganda machine in terms of justifying its invasion into Ukraine. And we know that they've been calling it a special military operation. They continue to do that on the public stage. And there you have it. That is President Vladimir Putin. He's speaking right now at this rally. Let's listen in. I don't think we have translation, but let's just listen into this.
And were guided by when they went to the referendum
in
марта
Sevastopol and
2014
Crimea
года. Они
on the
жили и
17th of
живут на
March
своей
2014.
земле. И
They
хотели жить общей судьбой со
have
своей
been living on their own
исторической
land, and they
родиной.
wanted
С
to be
Россией
reunited with their
они имели
historical
на это полное
motherland,
право и достигли
Russia.
своей
They had every
цели.
right to do so, and they
Прежде всего,
achieved
их
their goal.
праздником. Это
Let
их
us
праздник.
congratulate
Поздравляем!
them on this great occasion. Congratulations.
За это время Россия немало сделала
Over
для
this
того,
time,
чтобы
Russia has done a
поднять Крым и
lot
Севастополь.
to
Нужно было
raise
сделать вещи,
Crimea and
которые видны
Sevastopol.
сразу невооруженным
We had to
взглядом.
do things that are not
Они носят
immediately
фундаментальный
obvious.
характер.
They have a fundamental nature: gas supply, power supply, utilities, restoration of the road network, building new roads, new highways and bridges. We had to pull Crimea from the degrading position and condition that Crimea and Sevastopol were in when they were part of a different state, which funded these territories on a residual basis. But that's not the matter. The matter is that we know what to do next, how to do it, and at what expense, and we will implement all our plans. But it isn't merely a matter of these decisions. Crimeans and the people of Sevastopol did right when they put a barrier in the way of nationalism and Nazism and extreme nationalism. Because what was going in those territories is still going on. People who live in Donbass also disagreed with the coup. And immediately, punitive operations were carried out against them, and more than one. They were sunk into a blockade and constantly shelled. They were subjected to airstrikes. And this is what we call genocide. And to rid these people of this suffering and this genocide was the main reason, the main motivation, and the main objective of the operation that we began in Donbass and Ukraine. This was the objective. And this is when I think of the Bible. There is no greater love than if somebody gave their soul for their friends. And we can see the heroic deeds of our guys in the course of this operation. These words from the Holy Scripture of Christianity is something that is very dear to those who profess this religion. But everything is down to the fact that this universal value for all the peoples and all the confessions of Russia, and for our own people above all for our own people. And the best confirmation of that is how our guys are fighting in the course of this military operation, shoulder to shoulder, helping and supporting each other. And if the need comes, they will shield each other in the battlefield from the bullets as brothers. We have not had such unity for a long time.
That's an incredible clip, right? Does everyone get why that clip is so important? It's an incredible clip, okay? Now, when you see Putin here, and I'm just going to go to the chat box, okay? When you look at Putin here, does he look evil? No, he doesn't look obviously evil. So on the one hand, he looks absolutely evil. On the other hand, he's quoting scripture. It's not so clear. He's talking about fundamentals, roadworks, Crimea, right? There's a kind of yes on one hand, so it looks absolutely evil. On the other hand, he's quoting scripture. He's quoting the Christian Bible. And what's the topic of today? We said it's a clash between two love stories. That's the topic we put out for this week. And what is he talking about, my friends? He's talking about love. Who caught that? He was talking about love. Did everyone get that? That's a very big deal. He was talking about love, and he was talking about a universal value. He's talking about love. He's talking about nothing more noble than giving my soul for another. He's talking about we've never had more unity, union, right? Which is an expression, right, of love. Okay? And it's deeper. It's deeper. It's more subtle. We're going to get to, right, these 4 levels of consciousness we're going to look at. But I want to just feel this. He's talking about love, and he's talking also about brothers being so an incarnation of love, so an incarnation of Christ, so an incarnation of the Christian scripture, that they're willing to take a bullet for each other. Our guys, he calls them, our guys, right, on the field of battle. And if you're willing to look more carefully, this crowd, he didn't sound like Hitler, right? Saying Putin is Hitler actually misses who Putin is. Putin may be, right, evil, right, in the bottom line, but he's not Hitler. It's an entirely different quality, right? And he doesn't sound like Hitler, does he? And actually, if you look at the faces, I spent quite a bit of time this weekend watching clips of the Russian crowd and watching clips of Hitler's crowd. They don't look like each other, do they? Does everyone catch me in the chat box? Everyone tracking with me? Right? They don't look the same. And they don't look the same at all. And so we actually need to understand something here far more profound. In order to actually tell a love story, to evolve the source code of consciousness in culture, we don't want to regress to the level of the tragic. We've broken out of the pre-tragic. We're now in the tragic. And the shadow of the tragic, as we unpacked in great depth last week, is moral equivalence. And we actually critiqued one writer on 10 grounds of moral equivalence. And we wrote I think notes from last week. And Elena, thank you for your brilliant work, right? Just went on Medium this morning. We'll put that clip later in the chat box, right? But let's try and track this. There's something happening here, and we need a deeper prism, okay? So I want to notice one other thing that Putin also said. Stay close. He said, these people are being shelled at night. They're subject to airstrikes. Now, you notice that there's no irony in Putin here, where he's now killing civilians and subjecting them to horrific airstrikes, but he talks about, right, his special operation, which is his name for the war, which is part of the propaganda. You get 15 years in prison in Russia for calling it a war. And yet, here he is standing for the human dignity of those people within his circle of intimacy. Wow. So that's a very, very big deal. And we need to actually understand what's happening here. Let's read the code. Let's read the code. Right, let's read the code. So the code reads, reality can only be healed by the evolution of love, which is the evolution of intimacy. The evolution of love, which is the evolution of intimacy, requires powerful, sacred, value-driven intimacy. That's a key word at the egocentric level, the ethnocentric level, the world-centric level, and the kosmocentric level. And myself and Ken Wilber, right, and some of our colleagues for the last 15, 20 years have been talking about these 4 levels. I'm going to actually go to the source text. This is the best source text, right? Source text in the interior sciences, which I adduced 15 years ago, right, into the conversation. And I would call it not egocentric consciousness. I've called it for the last 15 years egocentric intimacy, ethnocentric intimacy, world-centric intimacy, and kosmocentric intimacy. Okay? Not consciousness, intimacy. And intimacy equals, and this is the intimacy equation, and I'm super excited that my dear friend Zach Stein and I will finally publish a major piece on this in the next few weeks. But the intimacy equation is, and I'm going to give you just the first half of it, and we've been talking about it for the last 5-6 years, intimacy equals shared identity. That's just the first sentence in the intimacy equation. Right? Intimacy equals shared identity. So egocentric intimacy means I have shared identity in my egocentric world. And ethnocentric intimacy, I've got a larger sense of shared identity, right, for me and my nation, my people. And in world-centric intimacy means I have an actual sense of shared identity, intimacy, with every human being on the planet. It's not just consciousness, it's intimacy. Intimacy equals shared identity, which is one of the core tenets of cosmoerotic humanism. And then after world-centric intimacy, there's kosmocentric intimacy. And kosmocentric intimacy means I have shared identity not just with every human being, but with the planet itself, with evolution itself, not just the planet, but with evolution itself, with every animal, with all living beings. Those are the 4 levels of intimacy, right? So there's the evolution of intimacy. Stay close. So the evolution of intimacy means the capacity to evolve from one level to the next level of intimacy. But when I evolve from one level to the next level of intimacy, and we're going to read a text, which is going to appear in the chat box actually right now. We're going to read a text together, which is an incredible text, which is where we originally sourced, right, these 4 ideas. And it's a text of my teacher, right, Abraham Cook. Right? And one of the things that Cook points out in this text we're about to see in the chat box, and one of the things he points out is that actually you need all 4 levels. You can't exclude any level. You can't exclude egocentric intimacy. You can't exclude ethnocentric intimacy. You can't exclude world-centric intimacy. And you can't exclude cosmocentric intimacy. You need to actually, to be the new human and the new humanity, which is what we're going to get to today, you need to actually embody all 4. And if you leave out one, you can't do realpolitik, and you can't do ethos. And ethos is rooted in eros, and eros is the largest wholeness possible. And the largest wholeness possible, which is the largest aliveness possible, can't split off any dimension of aliveness and any dimension of wholeness, or there's no shalom, there's no peace. You can't have shalom, the Hebrew word for peace, unless you can actually be whole. Because the Hebrew word for peace, and the very notion of peace is to be whole. And the Buddhists are not wrong when they say you don't make peace, you have to be peace. And to be peace means to contain within the depth of your being all of these levels. And if I split off any level, then I can't have peace. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Now, each of these levels, as we wrote in the code, needs to be whole. It needs to be the light expression, the healthy, the whole, the values expression, we called it, right? The evolved values expression of that level of intimacy, whether it's egocentric intimacy or whether it's ethnocentric intimacy or world-centric intimacy or cosmocentric intimacy. Now, I know, I can feel it. So a bunch of people, and I love MAD, think, okay, we got what we're saying today. We've just begun. This is just the frame. Now we're going to go deep. Okay, now we got to go deep. Okay? And we're going to come back to Putin. And I just want to notice one last thing before we actually go through these 4 levels and apply these 4 levels directly to this moment of realpolitik. And then we're going to talk about why these 4 levels are insufficient and we need to add a new frame, which we're going to do at the end, which is going to take us home. Okay? Wow. Okay? This is a big deal. So if you, for whatever reason, need to leave right now, 11 o'clock, I wanted you to have a full piece. But I'm hoping you stay with all of yourself, right? So we can really, right? We need each other now. We need to feel each other. We now need to start the conversation. Okay, and we're not here. We're not in one mountain. We're not being entertained. We're mad lovers. We're outrageous lovers. We're evolutionary lovers. We're playing a larger game. We're participating in the evolution of love. Right? Tears in my eyes. Okay, so who's ready to go? Who's ready to go? We ready? Who's ready? Who's ready? Tell me. Just let me just feel each other. Let's feel each other and just find each other in the chat box. Right? Love mad. And are we up for it? Can we just say to each other in the chat box, I love you madly. Let's do this. Right? Like, let's actually feel, right, the love moving in our space. Right? I love you madly. Let's do this. Right? We love each other madly. We are a unique self-symphony. We're going to get to that word as well today, right? In a new way. And I love you madly. Let's do this. Okay? I love you madly. Let's do this. Okay? Let's do this. So just notice, right, in the Putin clip that the commentator said that from CNN, right, that the people at the rally all had to be bussed in. And they said, we have no independent confirmation from CNN, right? And the leaders were all forced to attend. Okay? Now, and then they said, we have no independent confirmation. Now, that may or may not be true. CNN couldn't confirm it. And clearly there is, massive degradation and corruption, right? In both Russia and in China. The Chinese People's Army, for example, is a mafia, which is running drugs and kidnapping people and torturing people, right? The corruption levels of the Ukraine, right? Foisted on Ukraine by Putin's oligarchs directly and personally enriching Putin are beyond imagination. So I want to be clear about that, right? Having said that, it didn't occur, right, to the commentator from CNN that actually there was genuine ethnocentric intimacy and there was a genuine love of Mother Russia, which was a form of ethnocentric intimacy, right? And there was a genuine joy in Russia at the annexation of Crimea, right? Because they felt that Crimea actually was part of Mother Russia. She couldn't grasp, the CNN commentator, the notion of ethnocentric intimacy. So therefore, she had to explain all these people were bussed in and they were forced to come. Well, that might be partially true, although CNN couldn't confirm it. But if you looked at their faces, you also saw a genuine sense of ethnocentric intimacy, and you also saw a very different storyline, right? That was actually internalized by many of the people in that stadium. And we need to understand that storyline in order to be intimate with Russia, because we have to be intimate with Russia. Because if we can't be intimate with Russia, we're splitting Russia off. If we split Russia off, we're going to generate catastrophic and existential risk. We can't split Russia and China off. We can't create, which is one of the things that may actually result from this war. This war actually united the Western Bloc, which was a huge move, and in a certain sense may have been part of the intention of the West to force Putin into, right, to force Putin according to his own value structure or his own broken value structure, right, to force him to a place where he had no option, which would then rally the West, right, actually against not so much Russia, but China, which is actually done for the first time. But of course, there's unintended consequences, which is we might actually create a West-East bloc, which would be Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, together with China and Russia, right, against the West, which is actually something that's actually beginning to emerge in the space, which is beyond dangerous. So let's step back now. Let's step back. And let's begin, my friends, with egocentric intimacy. Okay, let's begin with egocentric intimacy. This is the first level. So I want to get something really clear. Each of these levels has a shadow version, and has a light version. And what's happening is the healthy version is often being split off, and we're identifying each other, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly, with the shadow version. So for example, Putin has identified the West as being fundamentally populated by egocentric intimacy. Does everyone get that? And egocentric intimacy means my shared identity is not with my nation. It's with me, myself, my body, my thoughts. I've split off a lot of my thoughts that I find to be not kosher, so I'm not intimate with them, but I might have intimacy with my family, right? Or some close friends, And for them, I have shared identity with them, and I'm willing to sacrifice for them. Okay, so Putin identifies the West not incorrectly with egocentric intimacy, meaning most Western families, whether they're in Belgium or Holland or Canada or the United States or France, right, are fundamentally, I care about me and my people, and not a lot of Belgian nationalism, not a lot of American patriotism in America, right? CNN itself, for example, in America, just as an example, has exiled patriotism to the Trump world. Right? Patriots, those are bad people. Those are crazy people. And any notion of patriotism, right? And Trump hijacked patriotism and degraded it with his phrase, make America great again. But the people who don't understand Trump's appeal don't actually understand ethnocentric intimacy and the depth and the beauty of it. And even though Trump himself is a degraded figure, why actually there's something in Make America Great Again that actually speaks to a spark of the sacred, that actually spoke to a large part of the population that actually couldn't care less about Trump, but actually felt for the first time the possibility of actually reclaiming ethnocentric intimacy. Now, when ethnocentric intimacy is split from value, when it becomes the value, right? Mother Russia is the value, independent of the larger field of value, then we get the shadow of ethnocentric intimacy. Does everyone get that? Okay, now let's go back though to egocentric intimacy. Egocentric intimacy itself has light and shadow. Okay, so I want to show you first, right, a clip of the light version, the beauty, right, of egocentric intimacy. Because the beauty of egocentric intimacy is I'm going to do the work with myself and be intimate with myself. I'm going to do the therapeutic work, right, to actually include the split off parts of myself. Right, I'm going to actually, right, work with my trauma. I'm going to actually work within. I just emailed with my good friend I haven't talked to in many years, Dick Schwartz, right, and we're just about to meet, who created something called internal family systems, who's been on our advisory board for many years, right, and this notion of internal family systems means I've got to become intimate with my family system. And there's a family system that lives in me, but it also lives with my family. And I'm going to do the work, the family work, to heal. And I'm going to maybe heal the trauma within my family. There might be a lineage of women in my family, and I'm going to heal that trauma, or a lineage of men, and we're going to actually create a stronger version of family, which has deep relationship, right? And fathers and son are going to heal, and mothers and daughters and father, right? In other words, working with the family and doing the hero's journey of my life, right? To actually become whole, to become intimate with those people in my circle of intimacy and those parts of myself that are split off. But that's a big journey. That's a beautiful journey. So that's the light version of egocentric intimacy, which is actually held strongly by the West, right? And it's one of the beauties of the West. So let's take a look. I'm going to start with that. The light version of egocentric intimacy. Putin sees only the shadow version, and he dismisses the light version as being kind of therapeutic culture. And that's a partially correct dismissal. Kristina Hoff Sommers wrote a book called The Therapeutic Culture, but the shadows of the therapeutic culture. That's true. There is an over-obsession and a narcissistic indulgence, right, in therapeutic culture. But underneath that, at the core, right, there's something sacred about egocentric intimacy, which is stunning. So fall on me. We're going to look at a clip, right, of two beautiful men, a father and a son, right? Singing to each other, right? And actually claiming this level of egocentric intimacy. And if you recognize the name of the person singing, put it in the chat box. So let's take a look at egocentric intimacy, level 1, in its light version. So what do we just see? Beautiful, right? I mean, who can feel that? That's egocentric intimacy. That's father and son. That's a deepening. Now, who can feel the beauty of that egocentric intimacy? Who can feel that beauty? Just a yes if you can feel it. Just a yes in the chat box. Just yes, right? Right? Who can feel that beauty? But when egocentric intimacy, stay close, becomes the only field of intimacy, that's all there is. When you stop there, then you split off a huge part of the intimate universe. And for 15 years, I've been quoting Master Dogen. Enlightenment is intimacy with all things. Or the way I like to repeat Master Dogen, with your permission, right, is, right, a statement we've also been saying for 15 years. Enlightenment means there's no externalities. There's nothing split off. So when I end my intimacy in the family system or doing my own therapeutic work, and that becomes the sum total of my intimacy, that becomes the sum total of my identity, then my identity collapses under the weight of the hidden split off structures. And then the therapeutic move, which is a beautiful move, which is an evolution of consciousness, which is an evolution of love, right? Psychology is at its best an evolution of love. But when that interior introspection becomes the entire story, and it's limited the interior introspection to my own psychology in the therapeutic dimensions, then it becomes what Kristina Hoff Sommers called derisively a therapeutic culture. Then it becomes narcissistic. Then it becomes obsessional. And then we begin to locate our egocentric intimacy, not with its deepest eros, but with its pseudo-eros, which is, where have I been wounded? Where have I been traumatized? Where have I been hurt? Because that's where I actually can get a quick hit of pseudo-eros, and then I become a culture of victims. Name of a feature magazine article, A Culture of Victims. I become a David Sykes book, A Nation of Victims. We create a culture of victimization, which is the shadow of egocentric intimacy, right? And I lose the capacity to have a larger vision, to have a willingness to sacrifice, to have a wider identity. And if I've stepped out of the field of value, I'm going to go to the next step. This next step is huge, okay? So let's just sit back and let's see if we can get this next step. This next step is huge. If my egocentric intimacy and my egocentric identity, me and my people, me and my family, right? If that becomes the only value, it becomes idolatry. And it's idolatry as a modern possibility is when I decontextualize a value from the larger field and I make it an absolute. That becomes the sum total of my identity. So when egocentric intimacy is the sum total of my identity, we get the narcissistic shadows of therapeutic culture. We get its degraded form of a culture of victimization, which means I create my victimhood. It's not about genuine victimization. We always stand for victims, but it's about creating my identity from my victimization. I become a victim and I cease to be a player on the larger stage. I don't have a sense of a larger or wider field of identity, a wider field of value, right? I'm not willing to sacrifice. I don't have a felt sense of care and concern beyond my immediate circle. And then again, as we said, and that felt sense of care and concern degrades. Now, one of the ways when we have egocentric intimacy that we create a sense of a larger field, we don't have a genuine eros, we don't have a larger eros, we're just an egocentric identity, but what we do is we create this pseudo sense of a larger identity. We create a pseudo sense of what we're going to call ethnocentric intimacy or ethnocentric identity, not by actually being identified at the ethnocentric level with my larger people, and not because those larger people stand for a larger sense of value, but based on creating an enemy. I create an enemy, I place the enemy on the outside, which gives me the illusion of being on the inside. So to be in the field of value To be in the field of eros is to be on the inside, right? To be in the field of value, in the field of eros, that's to be inside the circle, right? But if I'm not really inside the circle, I'll create the illusion of being inside the circle by placing an enemy outside the circle, right? Now, that doesn't mean the enemy's not a real enemy, right? The enemy may well be a real enemy. So, for example, the Soviet Union, until the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, was a real enemy. The Cold War was not a moral equivalence, right? There was huge complexity on both sides. And, John Le Carre, Lecarre, if I'm pronouncing it wrong, I apologize, in his spy novels talks about the thicket of darkness and the complexities, right? And, and the tragic level of consciousness, right, in that Cold War. But nonetheless, there were two distinct sides and two different worldviews, and they're not reducible to a moral equivalence. That's true. At the same time, we used the Soviet Union to create, right, a sense of ethnocentric identity in the Western world because we had an enemy, NATO against the Soviet Union. And even if the enemy was legitimate, it doesn't mean we didn't use it, right, to create our sense of who we were. So then the Soviet Union dissolves. Okay, let's track this, friends. Soviet Union dissolves. And now there's no obvious enemy. And that's the beginning of polarization in the United States and in the Western world in many ways. And how does polarization happen? Polarization happens because we don't have an enemy, but we also don't have a shared narrative of value. There's a collapse of value. Postmodernity introduces a collapse of value in the Western world. We've talked extensively. We generally cite Harari as, right, Yuval Harari as kind of a parrot of postmodernity, right, who says that all values are fictions, social constructions of reality, figments of our imagination, right? So watch what happens. And we're being leveraged now. We're actually seeing, to love is to see. As the Soviet Union falls, late 80s, early 90s, the internet emerges. The internet atomizes the world. As the internet emerges, the internet is the exteriorization, the exterior expression, the atomized, no narrative, right? Hyperlinks all over the place, not the experience of reading a book and following a thread and following a storyline, but an atomized internet, right, is the exterior expression of the postmodern mind and heart, which is also atomized, which says there are no narratives. And the only grand narrative is that there are no narratives, then there is no storyline. Right? And there is no storyline of value, and there is no what we call, quotation marks, a story of value. And so those things happen together, right? The fall of Russia, so the exterior enemy is gone. 2, right, the internet, right, the atomization, the narrowcasting, right? And then 3, right, the postmodern mind, the collapse of value and the collapse of storyline, right? So that all happens in the West, and that then introduces polarization because we don't know how to create our identity, right, through a shared story of value, through a shared eros. So we need a them, we need an us-them, but the Soviet Union is no longer offering that. And all we have is egocentric intimacy. And we've stepped out of the field of value. Does everyone get that? We've stepped out of the field of value. So what do? But you can't actually ever really step out of the field of value. We thought we'd stepped out of the field of value, right? We thought we'd stepped out of the field of value, right? We thought we'd stepped out of the field of value, but you can't really actually do that. You can't really step out of the field of value, right? So we always, even if we say there's no normative value, right? We actually take what Zach and I call a crypto-normative position. It's a beautiful term. Okay, it's actually sourced in Habermas. Crypto-normative means we claim a value, even though we've stepped out of the field of value. So when we claim a value, but we're not in the field of value, then that value becomes idolatrous. So take abortion. Pro-life, pro-choice. Life and choice are both values. But since those values are not part of the field of value, they become idolatrous. So all the life people, the pro-life people, can't see choice. They've split off choice. They've made their value an absolute. There's no dialectical dance between the values. And all the pro-choice people can't see the value of life, right? Meaning choice becomes the extreme position, right? And life is shunted aside because life and choice, the pro-life, pro-choice position, are stepped out of the larger field of value and they become an identity. And since that's my whole identity, my identity's got to exclude you. I'm the life person, but I only get my identity by excluding you, the choice person. Pseudo-eros. This is very subtle, but it's very beautiful and it's critical to understand. Right? I just shared this with my friend Daniel the other day. We were madly excited about it. And when I'm in the field of value, then we can hold value together and we don't polarize. This is why democracies have never gone to war with each other. Democracies don't go to war with each other because there's some sort of, even though it's long forgotten, but there's still an implicit field of value. So whatever our independent ethnic identity, we still have a deeper field of value. So we don't go to war with each other. And let me see if I can say it like this. For those of you who are familiar with the model of self, our five-part model of self, the 5 selves. So there's something we call true self. And true self is the field of the one. So value is true self. Okay? An individual value, an individuated expression of value is unique self. That's really helpful if you can get that. So choice is unique self. Life is unique self. But if choice and unique self are expressions of true self, of the field of value, then they can compromise with each other. They can talk to each other. They can synergize to a higher level, right? Choice and life can work together to create a higher vision of ethos and eros. But if choice and life are not unique expressions of true self, they're actually not in the field of value, then choice of life become, in this model of 5 selves, choice and life become separate self. Right? It's a separate self-identity. Each value is a separate self-identity, and therefore they clash with each other. Separate selves, as Hobbes said, are in a natural state of war. That's the source of polarization. Does everyone get that? Wow. I mean, it's gorgeous if you can see it. That's actually what's happening. So Putin identifies the West with the shadow, right? With the shadow of ethnocentric identity, with the shadow of egocentric identity or egocentric intimacy. And he thinks they're not willing to sacrifice for anything. They're not going to, they've got no value that supports egocentric intimacy. It's narcissistic. And I'm actually representing something bigger, right? I represent ethnocentric intimacy. Okay? Ethnocentric intimacy, which means I'm singing the song of the nation. Now let's take a look at the Cook text. I want to look at this text with you together now. Okay? Let's look at the text. Let's see if we can get the text in the chat box, right there. Okay? Let's take a look at the text. And we'll actually begin to see this, and it's wonderful to see, but it's the only way we can love. Okay? So there is a one. Let's look at the Cook text together. It's in the chat box. This is from Abraham Cook, who is one of the greatest evolutionary thinkers, mystics of our time. And I've tried to bring his thinking to bear. Right? And this comes from his book, Lights of Holiness. And he's talking about, and this is where I first sourced these 4 levels of consciousness. Okay? And look what he says. It's gorgeous. He says, there is a one who sings the song of his soul, which is what? Anybody? That's egocentric intimacy. And in his soul, he finds it all. Full, complete spiritual satisfaction. Egocentric consciousness, egocentric intimacy. But then, and there is a one who sings the song of the nation. He leaves the zone of his personal soul, which he doesn't find wide enough and not settled in ideal serenity. He needs a wider field of identity, and he attaches himself with tender love to the totality of the congregation of Israel. And by the congregation of Israel, Cook is talking about ethnocentric intimacy. Okay, so you can replace congregation of Israel with the congregation of Russia, America, right? Ireland, right? Irish, right? I'm Irish. Right? And together with her, he sings her songs and he suffers her pains and he takes delight in her hopes and he ponders high and pure ideas about her past and future. Friends, Putin is the shadow version of this, but you can't understand Putin unless you understand the light version. And he's drawing energy, right, because that which is, even that which falls to become rank evil, is always complex. It's not just realpolitik, it's not just power, it's drawing energy from the light. Even darkness draws energy from the light, and we can't transform darkness unless we can actually identify the sparks of light that are infusing the darkness with its energy. Okay? So this is the sparks of light that are infusing Putin, right? He takes delight in her hopes. He ponders high and pure ideas about her past and her future. And he investigates with love and the wisdom of the heart, the inner content of her soul, which is the nation. Okay? So that is actually, and let's stop there. That is ethnocentric intimacy that Putin is actually holding the shadow version of. Okay? So we're gonna listen to a song for a second. We're gonna listen to a song. Okay? Clancy Brothers. Now I'm gonna ask you during the song, if you can, don't text. We're actually, it's each of our energy together, right, and pouring our love into the center that's going to allow us to crack this open for the sake of the evolution of love. So we're going to see a clip now from the Clancy Brothers. It's called, right, The Patriot Game, right? And let's see the clip. And Krista, you can put the name of the clip, the name of the song, right, in the chat box, right? And this is about ethnocentric intimacy. We actually have to feel it, okay? Okay, let's feel it, okay? Let's feel it. Okay, so let's go for ethnocentric intimacy. This is the Clancy Brothers ethnocentric intimacy coming at you. Okay, here we go. Who could feel that? Who could feel that, everybody? Just if you could feel that. That is ethnocentric intimacy, and it's the tragedy. And let's put the words back in the chat box so everyone can see them again at the bottom. Okay, that's ethnocentric intimacy. It's the Patriot Game. I wanted to play my part, right, in the Patriot Game, right? Come all you young rebels and, and let's just kind of feel that, okay? Let's feel that. Come you young rebels, right, enlist while I listen while I sing, for the love of one's country is a terrible thing. But when he means a terrible thing, he means he's feeling the shadow and the light of ethnocentric intimacy, right? It banishes fear with the speed of a flame. So I actually have the sense of intimacy, this larger identity, and it makes us all part of the Patriot Game. But without understanding ethnocentric intimacy and its beauty, right, and its importance, right, we can't even begin to feel, right, who we are, what we've split off, what's missing, and what's necessary. My name is O'Hanlon, and I'm just gone 16. This is written about an O'Hanlon, an Irish Republican Army, the IRA, who are both terrorists who did horrific things and actually aligned with, right, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was the worst, right, of terrorism in the Middle East. And at the same time, right, we're using the fig leaf of nationalism and the fig leaf of an ethnocentric creation, complicated, right? So this is about O'Hanlon, who's 16 years old, right, who's an IRA soldier, right, who's dying. He's 16, he's been shot, he's full of holes, and these are his thoughts. His last thoughts are about the Patriots Game. And the Clancy Brothers, they're capturing both the intense beauty, right, and the allurement and the importance and the shadow, right, of the Patriots Game, right? And the island of ours has for long been half free, 6 counties under John Bull's tyranny. So I gave up my boyhood, right, to drift and to train, to play my own part in the Patriots Game. And now as I lie here, my body all holes, I think of those treasures, right, who bargained and sold. I wish that my rifle had given the same to those quislings who sold out the Patriots Game, right? The selling out of Mother Russia, right, which is experienced as a violation. We've got to feel that. Now, stay close. We got to go so much deeper here. In order for ethnocentric intimacy to be sacred, it has to represent not only racial or geographic boundaries. It can't just be Israel or Russia or the United States, right? Or Ireland, And it can't be, wow, you have missiles close to my border, right? That's a violation of my territorial integrity, right? And therefore, I'm going to launch a war. No. That's right. Careful. It's got to be because I have reason to believe that your values are going to cause you to invade me. And I've got to represent, that's one. And so there's zero question that NATO was not going to invade Russia. Wasn't going to happen. Zero question. Because the intrinsic value structure of NATO was not about taking Russia down. It was about actually making, right, and fostering and being able to engage Russia in trade and in partnership, right, and in a larger vision of value. That's one, but deeper than that. And my ethnocentric identity, right, has to come from, it has to evolve to, it can begin as a nationalism, but it's got to evolve to, and it's got to be sourced in some sense that I've got a unique gift to give to the world. That's critical. And it's my gift that I give. And it's at the center is never the teacher, it's the teaching. Right? It's never the nation, it's the dharma. It's what's the message, right? What is the nation holding? Here's a big word. What's the unique quality of intimacy of that country, of that ethnocentric, sociocentric group of human beings that is a critical gift into the unique self-symphony of the world? This is huge. Okay? In other words, we've lost connection with the notion that actually every nation has a unique gift. And Putin has distorted that idea into the realm of evil. But he's connected to the spark of sacred in that idea, and that's what fuels him. Does everyone understand that? And so, for example, Lev Gumilev, who advises Putin, Alexander Dugin, right, who advised Putin for many, many years, right, talks about, and we talked about it last week, about the biocosmic inner energy, what they call in Russian, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Passionarost. And wrong pronunciation, I apologize. P-A, let's put it in the chat box, P-A-S-S-I-O-N, passion, A-R-N-O-S-T. So passion, let's see if we can get it in the chat box, right? So that word, that's the inner energy or passionate substance, which is the quality, the unique quality of a people, right? And Putin said last year in February, says, I believe in Passionarost. In nature, as in society, there's development and climax and decline, and Russia has not yet attained its highest point. We're on the way. We possess an infinite genetic code. So when that expresses itself in its shadow version, it becomes racism. But it doesn't only have a shadow version, right? Its light version, right, is actually what is the unique contribution of Russia. And my friend Umair Haque, right, commenting on Putin, right, and on this notion of Passionarost says, this is weird. We don't really have a cosmology, right? Well, no, that's correct. We've lost the notion, right, of the unique self of a nation. We've lost the notion of ethnocentric intimacy because we've identified, just like Putin identified egocentric intimacy with its shadow for good reason. There's good reason to identify egocentric intimacy in the Western world with its shadow, but it also has great light. It's also the beauty of the therapeutic culture. It's the beauty of individuation. Right? It's the beauty of the hero's journey. We've also identified ethnocentric intimacy with its shadow, but actually it also has beauty. And actually, what we need the future Putins of the world to do, what we need Xi and China to do, what we need Orban and Hungary to do, which none of them are doing. They're actually using ethnocentric intimacy, right, in the Christian church, which is another form of ethnocentric intimacy, Christian ethnocentrism, as a fig leaf, right, for naked power ambitions. But actually, we need Russia to rise up and say, the world needs Mother Russia. And we want Tchaikovsky, and we want Dostoevsky, and we want Tolstoy, and we want, right, the Russian cosmists, the word noosphere, right, that we talk about in evolutionary spirituality comes from one of the great Russian cosmists, like Vladimir. right? And I can never pronounce his last name, and right, the early part of the 20th century. And the Russian cosmonists were incredibly important, right? We need Mother Russia, and we need China. And we need to be in reverence of Russia and reverence of China. And we need to hold with full dignity the beauty of Mother Russia and with full honor. And even if Putin has hijacked Mother Russia and turned it into a fig leaf for an oligarchy, right, which is in the great tragic tradition of Russian autocracy, of which Stalin was but one example and Putin's becoming another one, nonetheless, we need to speak directly to that sacred spark in the heart of Putin and, in, more importantly, the heart of the Russian people, which is the beauty of ethnocentric intimacy. And paradoxically, Zelensky, right, in Ukraine is standing gorgeously for the beauty of nationalism. Nationalism and liberalism don't oppose each other. That's a mistake. And there actually are absolutely in the Ukraine fascist expressions of nationalism. And there are actually also in the Ukraine Nazi expressions, right, of fascism, nationalism in the Ukraine. That's absolutely true. Putin's not wrong about that. And Zelensky's tried to integrate those, right, into a larger, healthier vision of nationalism, which is beautiful. Zelensky's obviously not a Nazi. You ever heard of a Nazi Jew? Right? So he's obviously not a Nazi. And he's actually evolved Ukrainian nationalism. Ukrainian nationalism was devastating. Right? Ukrainians were, right, the worst collaborators with the Nazis in World War II in killing Jews in Babi Yar. Right? But actually, we don't hold people to their past. We allow for transformation, just like Germany is transforming itself. Ukraine is transforming itself. And the reason that Ukraine is being welcomed into the family of nations is not as a strategic move simply against Russia, although there is realpolitik and strategy in that, because of what Russia represents, because of the value structure it represents, which is a degraded value structure, which is the idolatry of ethnocentrism, and not the great ethnocentric intimacy of the unique self of a nation, right? But the other reason we're supporting Ukraine is because Ukraine and the Ukrainian people have autonomy. And they're actually evolving into a healthy nationalism. Right? And they're actually creating a unique self-symphony of Ukraine. And they're rallying to Ukraine as representing value. Not Ukraine as Ukraine qua, these are the boundaries of Ukraine. We fight and die for Ukraine because it's Ukraine. There are elements like that in Ukraine. But that's not the core of what Zelensky is representing. What Zelensky is representing is a very gorgeous, right, evolution of love in which Ukraine is representing freedom, the best of freedom and the best of democracy, right? And Zelensky's actually fought against corruption that Putin seeded in Ukraine and Trump tragically allied with in a very major way. And Biden actually, as vice president, stood against. There are hierarchies of value, right? And because Zelensky is actually holding the sacred expression in this moment of what it means to be a nation, and a nation which represents value, we can actually say glory to the heroes and glory to Ukraine. You know, there's a man named, I'm going to ask someone to spell this in the chat box, okay? So whoever's going to write, is going to help me out here. I can't pronounce his name. He writes a daily chronicle from Ukraine. He's a professor. And then his name is M-Y. Is someone going to write with me? Help me out here. M-Y-C-H-A-I-L-O. M-Y-C-H-A-I-L-O. First name. Hopefully that's going to come up in the chat box. Second name, W-Y-N-N-Y-C-K-Y-J. Y-N-N-Y-C-K-Y-J. Okay? And I'm going to leave the pronunciation to someone else. But he writes very beautifully. And he writes, right, and he's writing, this is March 16th, and he's writing from Kiev. And he actually says that Ukraine is like a beehive. And a beehive is exactly the analogy that I always use to explain unique self-symphony, in which the bees have a common purpose, they have a common value. Every bee actually understands what it needs to do. And the beehive, right, has this intense and profound intelligence. And there's an entire literature now in biology on the intelligence of bees, the innate intelligence of bees that are holding this larger vision of value. And so he writes, apparently the analogy of Ukraine, the beehive, is catching on. I've been asked by several Western journalists to provide an explanation of why Ukrainians have mounted such a successful defense against the Russian invader, a defense that has stopped the ground assault of what was once thought to be the most powerful army in the world. And he says, the explanation that seems to resonate, that makes sense, is that Ukrainians are bees. And he's literally describing unique self-symphony. Bees won't sting unless you threaten them. I know I have 3 hives. Beekeeping is a common pastime, he writes, for Ukrainian men aged 50 plus, cultural fact. If you approach the hives confidently with appropriate respect, bees will even share their honey. It takes practice, but well-intentioned beekeepers can even draw honey without a mask. Even amateurs like me do it without gloves. Bees work. They collect pollen and nectar, carrying their own weight from flower gardens to the hive, right, within a range of 1 mile of the hive. On arrival, they unload their freight to the indoor hive bees, who through chemical processes dry the pollen nectar substance, converting it into honey. And they understand the process intuitively. There's a shared field of value. I'm adding that. There's a shared field of value. They don't need to be taught. Right? Wow. Does everyone feel that? And then bees, right, defend their hive. Right? If you're a bear, sticking your claws into a beehive is a bad idea for the Russian bear. Right? You think that you're large and powerful, that you're the dominant beast in your area, but don't touch the bees. Attacking their hive is just a bad idea. Now, in the end, the bear is going to crush the beehive. But the beehive is going to sting the bear enormously. And in the end, right, Russian superior military might can take Ukraine, but it won't be able to hold Ukraine without draining Russia of its essential life energy. And finally, he ends, and tears in my eyes, he ends as a beekeeper, right? This beautiful chronicler, this professor from Kiev says, I will tell you that bees mourn their dead, and that's true. Bees mourn their dead. Today, President Zelensky signed an executive order mandating a nationwide moment of silence every morning at 9 a.m. to honor the Ukrainians who have given their lives for our hive, our children, our fallen soldiers. This nation is invincible. Glory to Ukraine. Right? Glory to the heroes. All right? Can everyone feel that with me? All right? Wow. Wow. That's huge. And so the nation becomes a nation with ethnocentric intimacy when it actually, Putin's right. There is a biocosmic energy to every nation. And my friend Umair Haque, who ridicules Putin, doesn't get it. And actually represents, Umair is a classical CNN liberal, and CNN liberals, bless CNN liberals, beautiful, and a complete incapacity, right, to actually understand the spark of the sacred that's actually animating the darkness that Putin has imposed on the light of Russia. So in order to actually talk to Putin, I need to actually, because I have to talk to my enemy, even when my enemy is evil. Because we have to create a new world together, right? And regime change is not going to work, right, when it's exposed externally. So I need to understand what's the spark of the sacred. And Zelensky, paradoxically, is the representative of that, right, in Ukraine, because Ukraine is embodying, right, a value. So let's just think about this for a second. There's a unique self-symphony in a family when everyone in their family plays their unique role. We don't choose one person in the family to be the shadow, the bad uncle, right? And then we project all the shadow in the family and we split off what's actually happening. And the hero in the family is the one who's actually their unique self and who creates the kind of father-son relationship, for example, that we saw in the clip Fall on Me. When I do personal transformation in the family, when I transform myself and I transform the family in the best of therapeutic culture, that's what it means to be a hero. At the level of nation, the hero is the one who stands and embodies the value of the nation. And when an American patriot says, I regret that I have but one life to give for my country, he's talking about the best of ethnocentric intimacy, for the value, for the Declaration of Independence that my country stands for. Right? I want to play a national anthem for a second, okay? Let's play a national anthem. I want to feel this deeply. Right, so let's play, just for 1 second, let's play the French national anthem. Let's put the words in. French national anthem Let's put the words in and let's feel, where do we need to move, right? Ethnocentric intimacy gets stuck in a historical moment and it's covered with blood. But then I need to evolve it to the next level. Okay, so we're just going to take a minute on each one. We're going to play two national anthems. Let's give us the French national anthem, right, with the words here, so we can begin to understand what actually needs to happen. Okay? Okay, we're here. We are love activists. We're mad lovers now. We're making love with reality itself. Okay, so we're participating in the evolution of love. Give us the clip, and if we've got it ready. All right, we got the idea. We got the idea. Take it down. Let's look in the chat box, okay? Let's read it. David, right, read it. Read it for us, okay? Can you do that for me, brother? Right, read us the words of the anthem. Take it away.
Arise, children of the fatherland. Our day of glory has arrived.
Claire, right, Claire, give it to us. Right? Read it for us and give it to us a little bit in French.
Arise, children of the fatherland, our day of glory has arrived. Against us, the bloody flag of tyranny is raised. The bloody flag is raised. Do you hear in the countryside the roar of those ferocious soldiers? They're coming right into your arms to cut the throat of your sons, your comrades, to arms, citizens. Nos enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé. Contre nous de la tyrannie, l'étendard sanglant est levé. L'étendard sanglant est levé. Entendez-vous dans les campagnes mugir ces féroces soldats? Ils viennent jusque dans vos bras.
Right? Can everyone feel that? Right?
Égorgez nos fils, nos compagnes.
Right.
Aux armes, citoyens, formez vos bataillons. Marchons, marchons, qu'un sang impur abreuve nos sillons.
Right. Right, not my favorite French song, but that
not
is
mine either.
Right, not mine either. And so what do we need from France? We need from France to tell us, what does France represent? Right? If nations are going to go on, thank you, Claire. Thank you, David. Right? If nations are going to go on, and we need nations, we need ethnocentric intimacy, each nation has to actually say, what value in the field of value, or what set of values, what's my contribution to the unique self-symphony of reality? And that has to be modeled, right, by China, by Russia, and by France, and by the United States. And we don't have time now, but we could actually go through Russia's national anthem and Ukraine's national anthem. And you actually begin to see, right, in the United States' national anthem and Bulgaria's national anthem, right, we need to actually begin to reclaim ethnocentric intimacy. I took my son to a soccer game, the San Jose Rockets, right? And they did, right, the national anthem, right? Right? And I cried, right? Because you felt, and the entire place stood. Yeah, but you felt the sense of value. Now, let's look at Cook. Let's go to the last. We got 2 more steps. Here we go. Okay? 2 more steps. 2 more steps. Okay? Let's put Cook, right? Our original text back in the chat box. Okay? Let's put Cook back in the chat box. Now we're going to take our last 2 steps. And I thank everyone, right, for staying in. I know it's a big deal to stay in, right? So I just like deep thank you for the sake of the evolution of love. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your presence. But now we're going to take the big, huge 2 steps now. Okay? So now we move from, right, one more. Right, we need the next one. That's where the next piece of Cook is. We got one more. Here it goes. And there is a 1, right, in the chat box. We're now in Cook's text, and we're going from now ethnocentric intimacy, right, to world-centric intimacy. There is a 1 who widens his soul, even her soul. She widens her soul even further until it expands and spreads beyond the boundary of Israel, meaning ethnocentric intimacy, to sing the song of humanity. His soul is continuously enlarged by the genius of the human being, the glory of the divine image. Right? She aspires towards the human being's universal purpose and anticipates his higher holification. And from this living source does he draw the entirety of his thoughts and explorations, the aspirations and his visions. Right? So that's world-centric intimacy. Now, before we touch just for a second on world-centric intimacy, I just want to notice something. It's easy to confuse intimacies. So Putin talks about love. Did I ever remember that clip that we saw? I'm just going to find this in the chat box. Who remembers the clip where Putin talks about love? And he talks about soldiers in the trenches, right, being willing, right, to give up their lives, right, for each other and take a bullet for each other. Right? But actually, Putin's misreading it. Right? Not only is he propagandizing, he's misreading it. The brothers who are taking a bullet for each other, right, many of them are not taking a bullet for Mother Russia. They actually understand that Russia's not standing, right, for a set of values. They understand that Russia's corrupt. And it's why there's been 50,000 protesters across Russia, which seems like a small number. It's actually a huge number, considering you can go for 15 years to jail, right, and destroy your life. So to take that level of risk is beyond imagination. Right? So glory to the heroes in Russia. But the reason those men in the trenches are dying for their brother is because it's their brother right next to them. Right? It's actually, my dear friend Sally Kempton told me that her father, Murray Kempton, who was a great writer, used to say that he longed, right, for World War II. Because in World War II, when he was in the Far East, right, in battle, right, people would die for each other in the trenches. Independent, right? It happened to be that World War II was a noble cause. It was fighting fascism. But the Russian soldiers, right, even if they're completely dissociated, right, and they understand they're dissociated from, right, a genuine sense of Mother Russia, right, although there may be still a spark of it left in them, right, and there's letters from soldiers who are devastated by what they're being asked to do, but they'll still die for their brother. They'll die for their brother because that's the beauty of egocentric intimacy. My brother's next to me and I'll die for my brother. And so Putin confuses, right? He both hijacks ethnocentric intimacy and uses it as a fig leaf. And then he also confuses, right, actually brothers taking a bullet for each other, right? And that love that exists between them, right? That is the love, that's the universal love story that lives between brothers and sisters, which actually has nothing to do with ethnocentric intimacy, right? And Russians will stand for Mother Russia, right? There is a sense of Mother Russia in Russia, absolutely. But there's also this huge sense that Mother Russia doesn't stand for anything anymore, right? And that actually, right, Putin has to be called, and the next regime has to be called to actually stand for, right, a set of values that are Russia. And Garry Kasparov, who I mentioned earlier, is a beautiful example of that potential emergence in Russia. Now let's look, friends. Let's look, friends, at now the third level of intimacy. Okay? Let's find this, okay? Third level of intimacy is world-centric intimacy. And world-centric intimacy means, right, I stand for a world-centric set of values. That's a very big deal. And America itself, as we said last week, had forgotten its values. And its values, right, have to be the evolution of value. That's the first value. Value evolves. Right? And so we don't go for pre-modern values. We don't go for pre-modern imperium and imperialism. Values evolve, which means there's universal human rights. There's the rise of the feminine, right? There's a broader possibility for gender. There's a broader possibility for sexuality, right? It means that actually, right, every nation has a contribution. It means that we don't go to war, right, and invade a country, right, as a way of, right, buttressing our national identity. Right? It means that every individual's story needs to be celebrated, that every human being has a story, and that story needs to be heard and lived and celebrated, and that education, right, is a huge value, and that Bill Clinton can arise from nowhere and become president of the United States, even though he doesn't come from a moneyed class and he doesn't come from an aristocracy. And Barack Obama, right, can rise from nowhere and become president of the United States, right, even though he doesn't come from the aristocratic class. Right, that actually human beings participate, right, in governance. Now, democracy is massively flawed. And I did a dialogue, a colleague of mine, Layman Pascal, read a bunch of articles that were put up on Medium based on what we did here, right, in One Mountain on democracy. And democracy is flawed in 8 major ways. And democracy is failing, and we need to reclaim democracy, right? And in fact, as Shoshana Zuboff has pointed out in the last chapter of her book, Surveillance Capitalism, right, the value of democracy among the young has plummeted statistically, particularly among the millennial generation, because we've actually forgotten that world-centric values of democracy, right, and of open borders, right, are rooted in these larger set of values, these larger set of humanistic values, but intrinsic values, but what it means, what goodness means, and what individuality means, and what uniqueness means, and what personhood means, and what free will means, and what choice means, right, and what transformation means. All of these are intrinsic values. All of those values have gotten forgotten in the West. Putin was sure that we couldn't remember them. Putin thought that way because we ourselves had forgotten that we'd forgotten. Not just we didn't remember the values, not just that we forgot them, we forgot that we'd forgotten. But even when we forgot that we'd forgotten, we can be reminded. We can re-member. We can reconstitute ourselves. And so we reconstituted ourselves, right, in a beautiful and gorgeous way. And we created a unique self-symphony of value to respond to Putin. That's absolutely true. And that's gorgeous and that's holy. And the reason, right, in a period of 2 weeks, we were able to self-organize is because we self-organized around value. And let me add a critical sentence. All of modernity, the emergence of modernity, although it had dimensions of imperialism and dimensions of power drives, but at its core, modernity was a new set of values. And those values were individual personhood, and they were pluralism, right? And they were diversity, right? And they were, right, new visions of goodness and reintegrating the marginalized. And it was standing for genuine victims. And it was human dignity. And it was standing against sexual harassment. And it was a broader vision of sexuality and a broader vision of gender. And it was the emergence of a person's irreducible uniqueness, right? And it was, right, larger capacities for choice. And it was education. And it was feminism. And that's why modernity, in a period of 100 years of the emergence of modernity, the dignities of modernity, universal human rights, right? The new middle class, upward mobility, possibility for transformation, education, feminism, the abolishment of slavery, all of that self-organized in the world, right, across the Western world in response to value. That's absolutely true. But now stay with me, friends, okay? Because I want to get this last piece, because this last piece, right, is critical, okay? Right? And what we're trying to do here is, right, is and this is not, right, we have lots of formats for dialogue, right? This isn't the one. This is where we actually try and organize, right, and see the whole picture. And then there's lots of groups where we talk about it, we discuss it, we unfold it. Right? But here we're actually coming together, right, not in a kind of let's all chat, right? This is actually, can we actually see the bigger picture of value? And can we actually include all of the split off values? Okay, so I want to add something here, and we got to include this split off value because it's really important. Then we're going to go to the last step, and then we're going to finish. So a dear friend of mine, right, wrote me, right, the following. He said, I certainly buy that for scapegoating reasons, we're doing some crazy media zeitgeist, right? A media zeitgeist that actually shames even the COVID zeitgeist in terms of its speed and ubiquity about Putin as the guy to scapegoat. And given that the economy was completely destroyed from COVID, and specifically the US's response in a way that's about to become visible in the world, the idea that we have to sanction Putin and that's going to destroy the world economy, and we can blame him and not to have to blame the US leadership or the international leadership in the ways they completely failed during COVID, there's a lot of reasons why this demonization of COVID was useful. But in my assessment, and this is Mersheimer's position, and this is the position of the writer that I wrote last week, and in my assessment, NATO pushed Putin to have to aggress on Ukraine in a way that I don't know another move Putin could have had within his own value structure, other than saying, I'm abandoning Mother Russia, which is the value that he's holding as his public value. And I'm going to let you guys put rivalrous military bases that have missiles that will be within striking range of Moscow there. Actually, NATO could have done something else. NATO could have said, let's allow Ukraine, right, to become both part of Russia, right, not without giving up its independence, but be economically independent with Russia, to be protected by NATO without becoming part of NATO. There could have been, that's what Putin was asking for, right, and the West refused it. And why did the West refuse it? Well, because it actually helped the West, right, to organize the coalition against China. And in that sense, it was extremely helpful, et cetera, et cetera. I totally see how NATO could have done this better. I don't see how Putin could have done this better, given his value structure, which the West was aware of. Everyone catch that? That was a big deal. That's a very big deal. And I've got to bring that voice into the table. And that voice was held by Henry Kissinger, was held by George Kennan, one of Bush's advisors, by John Mersheimer, right, in a video that's gone all over the web, and by many intelligent people. So this is very important. This is the shadow of world-centric intimacy. When world-centric intimacy becomes a globalism that ignores the individual dignity of nations. Now, Putin might be the shadow version of it. He absolutely is. But we need to actually understand ethnocentric intimacy. And when world-centric intimacy excludes ethnocentric intimacy, and when it actually reduces, now stay with me the next step, and when world-centric intimacy stands against the individual. So in other words, when the World Economic Forum, headed by Klaus Schwab, talks about modifying people's behavior, creating a great reset in which everyone becomes part of a technocracy, right, in which all of your information's on the web, and you become, right, part of an instrumentarian totalitarianism. Right? There's a totalitarianism which actually the web undermines your free will, undermines your personhood. You become merely a product, right? An object to be mined for data, to be fed into machine intelligence, to be marketed to, which is the debasing of the individual. So in other words, stay really close, friends. When the world-centric vision generates not world-centricism, but actually under the cover of a world-centric intimacy, you actually have what we might call a financial-centric view, where markets bind governments. And this is what I wanted to get to, where markets bind governments, where techno-feudalists, right, and global multinational corporations view the world, right, as a marketplace, and individuality is devalued, right, and intimacy is devalued, and human transformation is devalued, and ethnocentric intimacy is devalued. Right? And value itself is devalued because the techno-feudalists pretty much across the board are postmodernists, right? And so therefore, they don't have a problem with taking your data without permission, feeding it into machine intelligence. They don't have, right, a genuine respect for personhood. And we're moving towards a world of radical techno-feudalism, technocracy, where a person becomes literally, right, literally a number, right, and a number completely controlled, right? And behavior modification becomes, right, an international system of behavior modification. That's the shadow, right? In other words, the entire global world becomes what? Becomes actually a rat in the maze, right? The entire global world becomes a Skinner's box, right? Controlled by the levers, right, of the controllers. And we've talked about this before. That's the shadow of world-centric intimacy, right? It becomes world-centric. And I want everyone to track this. This is so critical. And it's just like ethnocentric intimacy has a shadow, so does world-centric intimacy. And the shadow of world-centric intimacy is complete atomization, right? The atomization of the individual, right? A complete destruction of community, a complete reduction of the human being, right, to their lowest common denominator, a loss of checks and balances, right? The markets bind the state, techno-feudalism reigns, right? And globalism for its own sake, and in order to turn the world into a global market for the sake of an elite, right, becomes the shadow of world-centric intimacy. So just like ethnocentric intimacy serves the oligarchs, right, in Russia, and ethnocentric intimacy is a fig leaf, it's very easy in the collapse of value, which postmodernity has actually introduced. And remember, the internet is the exterior expression of postmodernity, we said earlier, for actually world-centric intimacy to become, just like ethnocentric intimacy, its own value, idolatrous. We're going to create a global world which effaces boundaries. We're not going to have nation states. We're going to have a global technocracy as envisioned by the World Economic Forum, in which everyone is a number and everyone's a commodity. And we actually upgrade algorithms and upgrade global algorithms and downgrade human beings and all the values that human beings are supposed to stand for. So does everyone understand why we needed to get here? We needed to get here not to lecture, right? Blank lecturing. It's got nothing to do with lecturing. We actually need to see. This is hard to see, right? I mean, it's taken me all week, right, to kind of work through this with you together. And I've worked it through with a team of 20 people. We've all worked this through together, but it's gorgeous and terrifying and exciting when you can see it. Once you can see it, David said in the beginning, love is a perception. I can see it. Once I can see it, I can transform it. In other words, world-centric intimacy has its own idolatrous shadow, right, which comes from a reductive materialism, which then moves towards, just like Putin said, we never been so unified. We've never had such a large, beautiful union. So Klaus Schwab says at the World Economic Forum, we're going to create this unified, homogeneous world, which heterogeneity, right, diversity, right, disappears, and the unique self of nations disappeared. We actually need something else. We need actually, right, a new vision of intimacy in which ethnocentric and world-centric intimacy work together, and each of them stand for value, right? Each unique self-nation stands for a vision of value. And the world-centric vision needs to be a world-centric incarnation of value. So Putin reminded the West that they stood for value. The West had forgotten about it. The West reclaimed for a short period of time and is still reclaiming the vision of value that introduced modernity. But actually, the postmodern vision is going to quickly take over. In other words, there's no question that the Klaus Schwab Great Reset, right, technocracy, right, is actually on the move, and it's rooted in the deep structure. It's not a conspiracy theory, right? Myself, Zach, many of us have spent a lot of time reading dozens of documents. It's deeply rooted within the mainstream, right, of the global elite. That's actually true. And that's why there's opposition to this. Now, the opposition in Putin's case is taking a horrific shadow form, actually incarnating that which we could rightly call evil. But here's the thing. Without making a moral equivalence, if technocracy downgrades the human being, and we actually produce, right, a downgraded human being who doesn't have a sense of choice, right, and we actually generate, right, the kind of world that technocracy, right, is actually seeking to emerge, we will have actually fundamentally destroyed everything that we've held valuable about a human being. The capacity to transform, the capacity to actually be irreducibly unique, the capacity to participate in democracy. All that's becoming a sham. So we need actually to reclaim world-centric intimacy. Wow. So let's finish. So how do we go home? 3 more minutes. Okay? 3 more minutes. Okay, how do we go home? How do we get home? We get home by actually being able to articulate, right, a world-centric, even kosmocentric vision of value. So let's go to kosmocentric intimacy. Here we go. Okay? We ready, everybody? Here we go. Let's find it. What's kosmocentric intimacy? I mean, it's gorgeous if you can see it. Kosmocentric intimacy is, and let's go back to Cook, and let's put Cook back in the chat box. See that the end of Cook back in the chat box, and we're going to finish with this. This is the last level of intimacy. Kosmocentric intimacy says, right? Kosmocentric intimacy says, everybody ready? Okay, and Cook's going to be in the chat box in 1 second at the bottom. Cosmocentric intimacy says, not like the shadow of world-centric intimacy today, which is let's create a globalism, which is rooted in techno-feudalism, right? And let's modify people's behavior, and let's have the world-centric oligarchs, meaning the technocratic elite, right? Have $150 billion, right? Have 5 companies, right? Have a gross national product, right? More than most nations, and actually control policy in America. The market binds the state, in which when Mark Zuckerberg is interviewed by the senators don't even know his business model, don't even know what questions to ask, and he smirks at them, right? And when actually Facebook decides to rebrand itself as Meta, to create a metaverse, and to market that into the West, and to actually literally desiccate the basic experience of being an embodied human, without any government having given them the authority to do that. No government voted for Meta, right? No government voted, right, for a metaverse. There was no people's uprising demanding a metaverse, right? A very small group of global elites were driven by both a world-centric vision in its shadow form, which debases the fundamental embodied human experience, right? And these private-public partnerships in which the state is bound by the markets and actually finances rule, right? It's a financial system. It's why, right, the ethnocentric state fights with arms, right? And the world-centric state, right, fights with sanctions. Now, those sanctions may be legitimate, but it's also not by accident that financial instruments are what's being used. And actually, we have a financial-centric, right, global elite, which is debasing the basic experience, which has decided, right, to foist a metaverse, right, on reality to desiccate the essential experience of embodied intimacy of a human being without anyone authorizing that to do that. Okay, right? Because they've actually deconstructed value. Because actually, right, the spark of the sacred in Putin understands, right, that actually, right, this world-centric vision actually debases core values, right, and a core vision of what could be. Right? Now that spark of the sacred in Putin has actually gotten lost in darkness, but it's that spark of the sacred intuition that's animating the darkness that actually keeps it going. So we need to get to cosmocentric intimacy. And what's cosmocentric intimacy? Cosmocentric intimacy is threefold. 1, animals, the entire animal world is included, right? 2, I actually am identified with evolution itself, right? So the entire animal world is included, meaning I don't eat lamb chops, meaning all life is included, right? Meaning Buddy the dog is included, right? Meaning right? In other words, I actually re-embrace life and I don't split off from my cosmocentric intimacy, the entire biosphere. That's 1. But 2, more than even the biosphere, I'm actually identified with the evolutionary process itself. And I actually know that the evolutionary process is a love story. Evolution, is the name of our new book, Evolution, the love story of the universe. Evolution is the love story of the universe, and I am an individuated expression of the love story of the universe. 2. And 3, love is an intrinsic value. It's not a value that Putin hijacks and deploys as a fig leaf. Love is an intrinsic value and it means something. And love is a value of cosmos, just like personhood is a value of cosmos. Cosmocentric intimacy means value is a function of the intrinsic nature of cosmos. And value evolves from matter to life to mind. And although there's discontinuity between matter and life and mind, there's also a continuity, there's also a thread of value. And the evolution of value is, in fact, the storyline, the plot line of Cosmos. Right? Cosmos is a love story, It's an amorous cosmos, and the evolution of value, which is love, the evolution of eros, right, is the movement of cosmos. And human beings incarnate individuated expressions of eros as individuals and as nations. And we live in a cosmoerotic universe. And that generates this new story, which we're calling cosmoerotic humanism. Right? That's kosmocentric intimacy. Right? Values are real. Right? And actually, China and the United States, right, and Russia, right, all need to come together in their ethnocentric expressions. Each nation represents the unique frame of value in the unique self-symphony of the world. Then we need a shared vision, a common-centric vision. Not state-centric, right? Not shadow of world-centric, financial-centric, right? But actually a common vision, meaning a new story of value, cosmoerotic humanism, or whatever we want to call it, right? The emergence of a new human and a new humanity, right? Rooted in intrinsic value. Homo Amor. That's the new human and humanity. That's the evolutionary movement, right? That's kosmocentric. It's the movement of cosmos that births a new emergent, which is, right, a new story of value, right, rooted in first principles and first values. And that's cosmocentric intimacy. But cosmocentric intimacy has to include egocentric intimacy and ethnocentric intimacy, right, and world-centric intimacy, right? That's what's possible. I'm going to read the last piece and cook. I'm a bit exhausted, right? But we got it. We can see it now. Does everyone understand what we just did? We just included everything. Now everything's included. Now we can actually, this is what it means to be a lover. That everything has a seat at the table, yet there's a hierarchy of value. We can actually find our way through. And we did this today, not as a local One Mountain event. And I know it was insanely long. And I apologize. It's somewhat insincere, the apology, but I do apologize. But actually, we need to do this. They're sitting in bomb shelters, right, in Kiev. Right? People are being killed. So we're spending 2.5 hours. It's okay. Next week, we'll go back to more classical times. But let's read together the end of this passage, okay? Right? So, and there is a one. So now he's going beyond world-centric intimacy. And there is a one, right, who engages daily in the chapter of song, right, who is promised that he lives in the emergent world. Right? And this is the one, right? The chapter of song, right, is a sacred book in which every animal has its own song. And he's speaking, I think we put in not the entire end. Let me see if I can get the entire end here. There is one who engages in a chapter of song who's promised that he lives in the new emergent world, right? This is the world of the universe, right? It's the whole world together, right? And then, right, there is a one who integrates all of these songs, who rises with all these songs together in one unity. And all of them send forth their voices. All together they play their melodies. And each pours their vitality and life into the other. And that yields the sound of jubilance and the sound of joy, the sound of celebration and the sound of exultance, the sound of rejoicing and the sound of the sacred, the song of the soul, the song of the nation, right? The song of humankind, and the song of the universe, the cosmocentric song, all flow together within her all the time, at every moment. And in this completedness, in the fullness, right, the song rises to become the song of the sacred, the song of God, the song of Israel, right? Israel meaning the world, the universe, and her mighty glory and beauty and her mighty truth and magnificence, right? It's a simple song. It's a double song. It's a threefold song. It's a fourfold song. It's the Song of Solomon to the king whom wholeness belongs, right? The Song of Solomon, right? The king to whom wholeness belongs. And I want to finish this, tears in my eyes. The Song of Solomon is the Song of Songs, right? And the Song of Songs of Solomon is the love song of the cosmos, right? And that phrase at the end, right? The Song of Solomon to the king to whom wholeness belongs is the statement in the interior sciences that actually the Song of Songs stands for apotheosis, the capacity of the human being to become the divine, which is precisely Homo Amor. That's the new human and the new humanity, where I become an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence and love beauty. That is the field of Eros. That is the divine field of Eros. So The Song of Solomon is only realized, this is what Cook is writing, subtly, beautifully, gorgeously. The Song of Solomon is only realized when I actually engage the light gorgeousness of egocentric intimacy, and then the light gorgeousness of ethnocentric intimacy, and then the light gorgeousness of world-centric intimacy. Then I step into kosmocentric intimacy, the intrinsic nature of value itself, and I embrace the animal, and I embrace all the previous levels of intimacy, and then I become Homo Amor. I become Solomon, right? I become the love song of cosmos itself. And that's who we are. We're all individuated expressions of the love song of cosmos. And when we all live our unique self, we come together in a unique self-symphony of nations, a unique self-symphony of peoples, in which actually the animals sing with us and the earth sings with us. The hills are alive with the sound of music, the sound of jubilation, the sound of joy. And that's the great prophecy. And that's the great possibility of possibility, which this day opens, right, to make real. Yes. I turn to Krista to close this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for everybody who was willing to stay, right, for this huge, right, amount of time, right? And just thank you for your love, and thank you for our unique self-symphony. And I'm on my knees in devotion, full prostration before you with appreciation and gratitude. Krista.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And thank us all, but also specifically Dr. Marc Gafni, thank you so much. I just want to ask everyone to pour in your gratitude, your energy, your life into Dr. Marc Gafni, because I know you spent hours and hours and hours preparing this, digesting all of the conversation to be able to lift it up to this cosmo-erotic, I want to say, intimacy. So thank you for doing that. And I can feel all of us doing it together here right now. And you spoke so beautifully, Marc, about this unique self-symphony, this beehive that we can become a part of. And this is my invitation and our invitation to each other here every week to step in and to participate, to give your unique gifts to this revolution, because we are truly, truly, truly chosen by time in this moment to do this together. So I just want to share a couple of ways that you can do that. And I'm going to do that by sharing my screen and show you all the beautiful new things that are happening on our website. So if you go to onemountainmanypaths.org. First of all, if you are new here, go to the homepage and make sure that you register right here, because we send you beautiful gifts every Tuesday. We send the replays, we send the articles, so make sure that you receive those. But also you can find all of that on our website here. If you go to resources, you will find here media, and this is a new page where you can find a beautiful podcast. Marc was already speaking about, let me refresh the page actually. Should be another one here. Yes. Marc was already speaking about the key dimensions broken in democracy. You can find that one here, but also another one that was launched this week, Life-Changing Secrets of the Cosmo-Erotic Universe, an amazing conversation that Marc had together with Aubrey Marcus. So go and check that out. Also, if you click here, the 6 key dimensions broken in democracy, that's where you can find the ebook that Marc was speaking about. You can download it right here. And then also we have here the blog, which brings you here to the articles on Medium. And this one is the last one from last week. So the whole teaching of Ukraine was edited by Elena. Thank you so much for doing that, and published here on our Medium page. So you can read all of that beautiful content. But most of all, we encourage everyone to step in and share it with your friends and invite your friends to come to One Mountain Many Paths this next Sunday. Last thing is, if you click here on partnership, you can see how you can become a partner of One Mountain Many Paths. And you do that by making your contribution, whatever feels good to you. It already starts from $25 a month, but we do encourage everyone to give as much as you can, because that will really help us to grow faster and invest more and more to reaching onto the world with this beautiful story of outrageous love. And as a member, as a partner, if you scroll down, you will see that you get access to all of these beautiful courses, which enables you to study this new story, these first principles and first values yourself deeply, and really make them your own and become Homo Amor. Thank you all so much for your attention this week. We're looking forward to be together again next week. And let's end, as we do every week, with dancing and bringing each other onto the screen. We will see our beautiful faces. So I invite you, technically, we will invite you to upgrade as panelists. Please click OK, because that will enable you to turn on your video. Then turn on gallery view so we can all see each other's faces. We'll put on some amazing music. We are the people, and let's dance and become and embody this as our prayer for the world. Thank you so much. We are the people.